Today we are going to discuss the top 10 MCU movies because there's this little movie called Doctor Strange. I think that's what it's called?
Yeah, and apparently he's in a multiverse of madness.
So we're going to go through the past, see what sticks out to us. Me and Garrett here.
His brother, the older one, nice to meet y'all.
Laying superhero takes were a little different.
These might be a little more conventional, we'll see. I don't know, you be the judge. I'll kick us off here. I've seen every MCU movie except for Black Widow and the Eternals. If Black Widow and Eternals happen to be your favorites, I'm sorry they're not going to be on this list just because I don't want to judge them without having seen them.
You son of a bitch.
Number 10, we're going to start small with Ant-Man. I just love Ant-Man just because Paul Rudd is extremely charismatic. He's a perfect Scott Lang. Michael Douglas is pretty good at Hank Pym, especially in his older years. Kind of would have loved to see a younger Hank Pym, just like based on the comics. The graphics of the shrinking and the growing of Ant-Man, great the humor, perfectly spot on, especially Lewis doing his recaps. And I think, honestly, one of my favorite things about Ant-Man is I think outside of the Avengers movies, this is the first one where we've seen a character appear from another movie and appear in the current one. Like, they just randomly have Falcon in this movie interacting, and it kind of makes this movie kind of part of the larger Marvel world, and you kind of feel like this is one of the first times where, you know, it's a full-on universe instead of just a bunch of solo movies that happen to meet up sometimes. You feel like this is a universe that's living and interacting with each other, and to me, that's why I like it.
So who the hell are you?
Hi, I'm Scott.
So my list is full of hot takes, and it's not me just making hot takes for the heck of it. I genuinely was trying to look into my own self and think, what 10 movies of the MCU would I rather watch right now? Starting off my hot take spree. Number 10, I have Avengers Age of Ultron. A lot of people, for some reason, don't really like this. I know, I guess it got really sloppy and they didn't handle everything correctly, I guess, or they thought Ultron wasn't done really well. I remember watching this before I was really even into the MCU. Ultron was a villain enough where he has a deep voice and is menacing and you can kind of see him orchestrating stuff, and it's really cool, the robot army stuff that they have going on. Hooked me in with that stuff. They also throw everything at it in terms of, it's an Avengers movie, so all the Avengers are in it, and then they have like Scarlet Witch show up, and they have Quicksilver show up, and they have Vision show up. It just really made me feel like this was important, and it did matter. Back then, I was like, this is exciting, and I can't wait to see what they do with it, and they do even better stuff further on down the road. I don't know why this one gets, hey, I honestly think it might be better than the original Avengers.
To me, the reason that this isn't high on my list, and the original Avengers is higher on mine, I mean, James Spader does a great job as Ultron, don't get me wrong, but I am not a fan of the Black Widow-Hulk romance. I feel like that's Joss Whedon being the ultimate Joss Whedon, and yeah, he can write, but sometimes his writing of romance is a little squicky for my tastes.
But if you go Paris, then who help Hulk? Eat ice cream.
There's just a lot going on. It's kind of a running from point A to point B to point C kind of movie. To me, I rank this as the lowest of all four quote-unquote Avengers movies, but I can definitely understand why you like it. I mean, it's definitely a fun movie, especially the scene where they're all trying to lift Mjolnir. I think that's one of the top comedy scenes in the entire MCU, especially now that we know the payoff in Endgame.
Come on, Cap.
Nothing.
Number 9, Guardians of the Galaxy, the original. So when I first heard of this movie, I had no idea really these characters existed in the comics. I had heard my roommate talking at some point that they're making a Marvel movie based out of a talking raccoon and a tree, and I'm like, there's no way this movie's gonna work. Like, Marvel is really stretching here. I still remember an old SNL skit where they were talking about this, like, the next Marvel movie, a bunch of shopping carts coming down.
Some shopping carts.
Guardians of the Galaxy actually really worked for me. I think this is the first time in the MCU where they really embraced the comedy. Avengers did that to an extent. I feel like Guardians of the Galaxy tried to be more of a comedy movie first over a superhero movie, but it had excellent characterization, excellent acting. I think every single actor, Chris Pratt, Zoe Saldana, Bradley Cooper, Dave Bautista, and even Vin Diesel with only 5 separate words in the entire script for him, brought their A game to this. Yeah, I get the criticism that Ronan is a pretty terrible villain overall.
Oh!
But that dance-off scene at the end, all the comedy throughout, and just the way that they bring all these characters together and really expand the Marvel Universe beyond just Earth, perfect to me. And honestly, I love it so much. I go back and watch it again and again. It's great.
Said it yourself, bitch.
Number 9, I have Black Panther. Now, going into this, I wasn't expecting anything too crazy. I heard it was very, very good. And then I got there, and overall, the thematics and everything underlying beneath the surface level story, I thought was really, really, really well done, especially Killmonger and Michael B. Jordan's performance. You can just see from his perspective entirely where you're like, yeah, 100%, you're in the right, dude. You know what's going on. You are doing this correctly. But then also it does a really good job of showcasing T'Challa's perspective, and you can kind of just see both sides of the same coin. I was 100% rooting for Killmonger the whole time. But even then, you all still have this beautiful world that's built in Wakanda, and you see all the beautiful cliff scenes and the tribal stuff, and the way it's all incorporated is just very well done. The rhinos are kind of ridiculous with the CGI, but it's not really that big of a deal because the basic themes and everything is all there, and it's all really well done, and Ryan Coogler is a great filmmaker, and I'm very interested to see what happens with the sequel, but I mean, I assume they'll do a good job with it because they haven't screwed it up before, but very sad that Chadwick Boseman is no longer with us. That day was pretty shocking.
That kind of segues into my number 8 is awesome.
Wait a minute!
Well, not awesome. My number 8 is Black Panther. A lot of my points for why I like Black Panther, same reasons he likes Black Panther. Killmonger, one of the best, if not the best, MCU villain of all time. To be fair, it's not hard to be a really good villain in the MCU. Some of them are pretty bad. But yeah, Black Panther, real good. Chadwick Boseman knocks it out of the park. Michael B. Jordan knocks it out of the park. The rhinos, yeah, CGI stinks, but come on, a war rhino, that's just awesome, guys. That's just awesome. Honestly, has one of my favorite lines in the entire MCU, hands down, and that's the line that Killmonger says right before he supposedly dies. We never see a body, he could come back, who knows?
Just bury me in the ocean with my ancestors that jumped from the ships, because they knew death was better than bondage.
That just left me speechless in the theater. That line's so deep. Would be in, a Marvel movie.
My number 8 is my hottest of takes. Captain America, the first Avenger.
Okay.
This is the first MCU movie that I've ever seen. I saw this in the theater for whatever reason. I didn't really know the MCU even existed because I remember back when I saw it, I saw Samuel L. Jackson show up at the very end, and I'm like, what the heck did Samuel L. Jackson show up? He's in everything. And he's got an eye patch, what's the heck? But obviously, that had been set up quite earlier with Iron Man, but I was not aware. Anyway, I remember rewatching this like 3 or 4 years ago whenever all these really big ones came out, and I thought it was just genuinely very underrated. The fact that it takes place in the World War era, that's one of my favorite eras to just kind of watch. This is one of those movies that also happens to be a superhero movie, and I think Chris Evans does a fantastic job embodying Steve Rogers and Captain America. The CGI of his face on his skinny body is pretty bad now, but it doesn't really matter because it gets the point across, and it's not like it takes you out of the movie for me because I think the movie is really well done. I thought Red Skull was an interesting villain. They also kind of have fun with the patriotism stuff of it, while also like embracing that element of it. Most underrated MCU movie for me personally.
Plus he punches Hitler, and that's just awesome.
Who doesn't like that?
Number 7, closing out one of the trilogies that a lot of people thought was weak at the start, but really picked up steam at the end, Thor Ragnarok. Now, original Thor's characterization, I felt he was a little too stiff. Thor the Dark World, I thought that was a lot of stiffness, and I thought the villain was one of the worst. I remember his name Malekith, but very few people ever do.
Who?
But Thor Ragnarok knocks it out of the park. Taika Waititi comes in, completely revamps the Thor formula, revamps his character. He's still got the brash warrior feel to him, but he's also kind of got a little comedic vibe to him as well. Loki's character, they do him great. One of my quibbles with the MCU is that they make Loki more of an anti-hero than they make him a villain. But if you're going to make Loki an anti-hero, do what Taika Waititi did in this movie. The addition of Hulk. I kind of wish we didn't see that in the commercial, but I was still incredibly excited to see Hulk and Thor team up in this movie, and kind of a little adaptation of the Planet Hulk storyline. Cate Blanchett does a phenomenal job as Hela, one of the best villains in the MCU. Just incredibly intimidating, incredibly fun. And of course, Mr. Krabs is the big fire monster. Clancy Brown always knocks it out of the park.
I know, but he can't.
Basically, Thor Ragnarok really changed around the Thor character, in my opinion, for the better. Just a ton of fun. I really enjoy it.
Number 7, I have the first one, Iron Man. that is the one that got everything started, setting up everything that we have today. Robert Downey Jr. was very important in doing this by portraying Tony Stark and Iron Man and making it a character that is a movie character that you care about, to the point where you're kind of like, they're based on comics, and you're like, oh, what's coming next? What's this or that? And you're kind of more interested by the time they come to Ant-Man and all these other things, because Robert Downey Jr. did such a good job of making these clearly great movies, not just, these are comic book adaptations, which they've done excellently before Iron Man, but they were kind of more hit or miss, and it was more just the director being really good. Now it's kind of like a part of an operation under the Marvel guys, and they have Iron Man to thank for that.
Robert Downey Jr. knocked it out of the park. He is Tony Stark, for now and forever.
Iron Man.
Number 6 is Doctor Strange's original. I'm personally a big fan of the Stephen Strange character. I love the mystic arts in the Marvel Universe in general. Just like Robert Downey Jr. knocked it out of the park as Iron Man and embodies Iron Man and Tony Stark, I feel Benedict Cumberbatch embodies Stephen Strange and everything Strange is about. Basically, Tony Stark is the incredibly arrogant technology guy, in the same way Stephen Strange is the incredibly arrogant magic guy. And I feel like they really got that across. The visuals in this, I think, are some of the strongest in the entire Marvel movie canon. The scene where the Ancient One transports Stephen before he even gets his magical powers and just transports him throughout kind of the multiverse is incredibly beautiful. Stuff with the mirror dimension is technically incredible. And honestly, this has one of my favorite villain fights of all time in the Marvel movie, and in fact, one of my favorite villain fights in all of superhero canon. Just because it's not really a fight, Doctor Strange loses time and time and time and time and time again, and just finds a completely novel way to get through this conflict. And I thought that was an incredible twist on the formula.
I've come to bargain.
Doctor Strange, fantastic movie.
My number 6, Guardians of the Galaxy, the first one. Garrett pretty much covered it. Music, soundtrack is by far easily the best soundtrack in any of these movies, and one of just the best soundtracks of all time. And the way that they marketed the soundtrack was brilliant, with the tape deck and having that be a visual that you can literally go out and purchase, and that could be like the album covers for this and that. Yeah, just really well done. The songs they picked, just fantastic, and James Gunn does a really good job with these kind of fun movies. And it's really cool that a guy that's that creative from his Trauma days and everything gets an opportunity to have these big budgets and make these really fun, wild movies and just go absolutely nuts with it.
I completely forgot to mention the soundtrack, so thank you.
Not important.
No, not important at all. My number 5 pick, Avengers Infinity War. My favorite of all the Avengers team-up movies. I feel like it really did a good job bringing the entire MCU together. The most ambitious crossover event in history. I feel like they really did justice to all the characters that are in the MCU at that point. Being in the theater opening night, when the snap finally happened.
You should have gone for the head.
You knew in the back of your head that, yeah, there's going to be another one, and these characters are going to come back. But seeing those characters just disappear on screen, the characters you know and love, it's devastating. Tom Holland knocked it out of the freaking park with his disappearance. I mean, you knew he was coming back, but that was still heartbreaking as all get out.
Sorry.
My number 5 is Captain America Civil War. They're all together again, and then they had the Spider-Man coming into the movies. This was his first appearance. As a movie, it does a really good job of portraying two different sides of the coin again with Captain America and Iron Man, and you can kind of pick your own side in your head and kind of think, well, what would I do if I was a superhero? You know, where would I go with this or that? And it kind of does a really good job of realizing, oh, these are superheroes. What impact would they have had on the world from Age of Ultron after destroying the world? What kind of thoughts would politicians have? What would just regular people have in terms of how we should deal with this as an issue? Are these good guys, or are they not really actually, because they maybe cause more harm than good? But at the end of the day, they saved you from some stuff.
I don't care.
My number 4 pick is Captain America Winter Soldier. My favorite superhero in all of Marvel Comics is Captain America. This is an excellent execution by the Russo brothers of just a general superhero action movie, and I felt like it dealt with a lot of really cool themes about government surveillance and government overreach. The Hydra organization that they brought into this was pretty low-key to the ground, but awesome. It still felt very Hydra-esque. Chris Evans as Steve Rogers, Captain America. The action scenes were impeccable. The elevator fight scene, still one of my favorite fight scenes in the entire MCU, bar none. Scarlett Johansson as Black Widow was great in this. Anthony Mackie as Sam Wilson introduced a fantastic sidekick to Captain America at first, and then now through the Falcon and the Winter Soldier TV series. I cannot wait to see what he does with the character going forward as the new Captain America. And of course, Sebastian Stan as Bucky Rogers coming back and being just a brutal fighter with absolutely no conscience, like no idea what he's doing. I felt like he portrayed that kind of character super well, and I love what the MCU has done, having his character reconcile with his past. Brought a lot of cool points into the character, did a lot of great things with the characterization of these people, and the action was just absolutely impeccable.
That's number one on my need to rewatch list because it's on everybody's top 5 list easily in terms of MCU, and it is not going to be on mine because I don't remember enough of it. That is why my pick at number 8 would be so controversial. Number 4, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I thought that this one was better than the first one. I remember seeing it in the theater and just thinking, wow, this is perfect. This is probably the best MCU movie. That's how I felt about it by the time it got to the ending in terms of all the emotional stuff that does really well incorporating it with Yondu, Star-Lord, and everything going on. Even Drax, like just random and Rocket and Groot, they have a very good connection in this movie that gets played up really well. Everybody has a pretty nice arc, and it's also just really funny. And Kurt Russell is one of the better villains in the MCU to date, playing Star-Lord's father, and that does some really good dynamics in terms of Star-Lord grappling with stuff back on the real world Earth versus him out on his space journey, and does a really good job of kind of juxtaposing that and furthering him along as a character. Got me really excited to see Guardians of the Galaxy 3, which we still haven't seen. I could still argue that it's the best MCU movie of all time, but they went a little nuts and got really big very shortly after, so that's why it's only at my number 4.
My number 3 pick is Captain America's Civil War. One of my favorite Marvel comic storylines that I have ever read is the Civil War storyline. There's just a lot of really cool moments in the comics that were reflected in the movie. They brought in one of my favorite Captain America speeches of all time from the comics and gave it to Peggy Carter's niece in this movie at Peggy's funeral.
Even if the whole world is telling you to move, it is your duty to plant yourself like a tree, look them in the eye and say no. You move.
I thought that was an excellent touch. Perfectly encapsulates Captain America's just general ethos, just general outlook on life. This movie did a great job playing up, here's Captain America's side of the conflict, here's Iron Man's side of the conflict. Neither one is necessarily better than the other, they just have different ways to tackle the problem. And I felt like it did a great job, balancing it. This didn't really feel like a Captain America movie to me. This felt like Avengers 2.5, and I mean that in the best way. That airport hangar fight scene where everybody comes together, rushes at each other. Spider-Man comes in, stealing Captain America's shield. Ant-Man becoming Giant Man for the first time.
Holy shit!
Honestly, that's one of my favorite MCU moments ever. I felt like this really did a good job. Like where Ant-Man kind of started the whole, this is a wider universe and anybody can appear in anybody's movie at any time. This really cemented that in the MCU, and this really made the movie feel like a universe. Plus the final fight between Captain America and Iron Man. The iconic moment with the shield deflecting Iron Man's blast. God, that is one of the best visual just instants in the MCU, hands down. And I don't know, I just love this movie.
At number 3, I have Avengers Endgame. This is a nice end arc where it's culminating in the 20-plus movies that have appeared before it. You have literally everybody on screen at once, which is absolutely bonkers. A freaking portal scene, I'm sure some of you have seen it. It didn't get much of a reaction at the time it came out. All these little moments of character are also sprinkled into that scene in particular, but then also just the general movie playing up the desperateness and demise, the kind of feel for, having lost so many people. They kind of play that up and having with the group of people that's left. They do a really good job with that. They still have fun moments with it. Ant-Man's eating a taco and the Hulk comes along. Dumb crap like that, but it's fun. The time high stuff is really fun too, where they kind of go through the other movies. Really emotional in terms of the Iron Man setup. Could not have done it any other way. Like he started, that was your choice. You made that the first movie, so now it has to end like that. It was just really well done, and just even the Captain America ending is just fantastic. The only real issue I had with it is you didn't really feel like Thanos had a chance to win, and it's not because oh yeah, the heroes win in the end. Just in the moment, the fact that it wasn't the same Thanos felt a little off in terms of how well his plan was being set up and executed. Felt like a little more bumbling than the other guy. But anyway, it's fantastic. They chop his head off at the beginning. I mean, you can't ask for too much more.
I went for the head.
Such a great experience that you can't not put it in top 3, I think. But I can see some arguments if you're just focusing on this whole movie.
This is not in my top 3. The reasons that I don't have it aside, one, I feel like your issue with the Thanos character in this versus in Infinity War aren't really heightened for me. Like, it doesn't really feel as satisfying as it would have been if it was the same Thanos. I just feel like the time heist kind of, while it is incredibly fun, and I do love America's ass.
As far as I'm concerned, that's America's ass.
Introduced kind of a cop-out for the MCU where stakes don't really matter super much anymore. You don't see time travel again, but it kind of felt like a little bit of a cop-out, like they had no idea how to resolve the conflict, so just, you know what? Time travel. It's not to make a good movie for Marvel fans first. Instead of, making a good movie first and please the Marvel fans second, they wanted to please Marvel fans first, which, as a Marvel fan, I appreciate. This is still my favorite theater-going experience of all time. Hands down, bar none. But the fact that I felt like they tried to please Marvel fans first, instead of making a good movie first, is why I don't have this as high on the list, even though this is still a really good movie, and I thoroughly enjoy it. Number 2 is actually my pick for the most ambitious crossover, not just in Marvel movie history, but in cinema history. Spider-Man No Way Home. If there's any trilogy in the Marvel movies that I feel rivals the Captain America trilogy, it's the Spider-Man trilogy. I felt like the movies just kept getting better and better and better as the series went on, and this is like the perfect cap. Spider-Man trilogy in the MCU, to me, feels like an origin trilogy. And at the end of this movie, Tom Holland is finally Spider-Man. I mean, he was a Spider-Man character in Homecoming and Far From Home, and really good. I do not agree with the people who call him Iron Man Jr.
Look at little Iron Boy Jr. Gonna cry?
He's distinctly his own character. He's distinctly Peter Parker, but he's still trying to figure out his own way through life, through being a superhero. And at the end of this movie, I feel like he has it figured out, and it's beautiful to see him swinging into the screen at the end of this. And of course, the Sam Raimi 2002 Spider-Man with Tobey Maguire was the first superhero movie that I had ever seen, and that got me hooked on the bug of superhero in general. Marvel, DC, Image, all of them. And just seeing him come back in this movie along with Andrew Garfield, who gets a very bad rap as Spider-Man. Yeah, the movies around him weren't good, but he was a really good Peter Parker as Spider-Man. Just seeing them all come back, it's just a glorious moment. And of course, the villains. I know they weren't original to the MCU, but these are still some of the best villains ever. And Norman Osborn as Green Goblin, in my opinion, still the best villain of any Marvel movie.
Which reminds me, number 2 on my list is Spider-Man No Way Home. I was ridiculously hyped for this, beyond reasonableness. It was to the point where I don't want any of it spoiled at all because I was so excited for it, but also to the point where I'm just like, I gotta read everything I can about this movie. I gotta know anything that anybody's ever said about Spider-Man No Way Home a year and a half or 2 years before the movie even comes out. It's like, is Tobey Maguire gonna be in this movie? Is Tobey Maguire gonna be in this movie? Is the Tobey Maguire Spider-Man gonna be in this movie? Just every day, pretty much like every 5 days, I was very much, it's stupid because you don't want to ruin stuff like that for yourself, but at the same time, I was just like, I was going to die if they just blew this opportunity and they did not somehow get that done. I don't know. It was a really weird, toxic thing, but also a genuinely exciting thing. It was a positive thing, but at the same time, it's just kind of a really weird thing. I was just waiting for that moment in the theater, and then it happens, and it's fantastic, and it gets me excited for hopefully they can do a Spider-Man 4, they can do an Amazing Spider-Man 3. Like, I don't care. Just give me all the Spider-Mans. Like, that's all I am asking for. It would not be an issue. Like, Sony, if you want to keep your rights to Spider-Man character, stop pumping out these stupid villain movies that nobody cares about. Just pump out
Morbius.
No one. But it also made $1 trillion at the box office. Hashtag Morbius sweeps. But stop putting those movies out. Like, obviously Marvel would have some say whether or not you're allowed to do that, I guess. But, like, if they have some say whether you're allowed to make a Tobey Maguire and an Andrew Garfield Spider-Man movie, then I'm pretty sure they would have some say on why the hell are you making a Morbius movie that sucks and for some reason takes our Vulture character and throws him into this world in the cringiest way possible. Like, the Morbius movie wasn't in itself that bad. It was just bland. And then all of a sudden the after credit scenes happen, and it's literally like a computer wrote the scene. Like, computer took all these after credit scenes from these actually good Marvel movies and that get you hyped and everything, and it just jumbled it up into a word search, and it was like, oh yeah, here it is. Yeah. And that's essentially what it was. But anyway, if you're allowed to do that, just make me some damn Spider-Man movies. Like, make me an Andrew Garfield, Tobey Maguire Spider-Man movie. I don't care. Just make whatever you want as long as it's a Spider-Man movie.
Would you take Peter Porker?
Yeah, make me a freaking live-action Peter Porker movie. Like, I don't care. I don't need a Black Cat movie. I don't need a Kraven the Hunter movie. Here's how you make a Kraven the Hunter movie. Make a Spider-Man movie and put Kraven the Hunter in it. There you go. Sorry. But, yeah.
You know you sound like J. Jonah Jameson right now, right? Give me movies of Spider-Man! I need movies of Spider-Man!
Yeah.
I want Spider-Man!
That's exactly how I feel. Just get it done.
Sony, let Andrew Garfield fight a freaking alien, okay? It's not hard. You've got Tom Hardy, Venom right there. Just have them go at it. So wrapping up my list, my number 1, Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 2. I get basically everything that he already said about it. I completely agree. The characterization in this movie, perfect. Like, if you're going to do a characterization of any characters in Marvel, I follow James Gunn's model in Guardians of the Galaxy 2. He makes you care about Rocket, Yondu, Drax, Peter, Nebula, and Gamora, like, to a ridiculous degree. Like, I can't even tell you how many scenes in this movie still, to this day, make me cry. And it's not just, like, all at the end. There's... When Yondu's telling Rocket that Rocket's basically just like him, that gets me. When Yondu gives Peter his helmet, that gets me. When Peter says, I got a pretty cool dad, that gets me. When Gamora lets Nebula go to fight Thanos, that gets me. And of course, Cat Stevens' father and son funeral scene at the end. I'm a freaking baby bawling at the end of that. Like, this movie is the most emotional Marvel movie of all time, in my opinion. And yeah, I get the criticism some people have with the humor in this. I personally think it's funnier than the original Guardians. But most importantly, all the rest of the emotions were there. And I feel like this movie, more than any other in the Marvel movie, understands human emotions and understands how to let characters feel and lets them feel the full gamut of the human emotional spectrum. It's still got all the amazing visuals from the original Guardians. It's still got the incredibly amazing soundtrack. In my opinion, maybe controversial, I think this soundtrack is better. Fleetwood Mac, The Chain, Cat Stevens, Father and Son, Jane the Americans come a little bit closer. Perfect.
So, my number 1, probably obvious by now, but my number 1 is Avengers Infinity War. I just think this is the perfect... If you wanted to show somebody an MCU movie as like, oh, what the heck is an MCU movie? Then I would show them this. This movie, I remember getting off work and going to the Thursday premiere by myself, sitting in the corner of the theater, and was perfect. Like, all the characters are great. They all have their shining moments. And most importantly, I know you might think Thanos is the big star here, and he was very good, and he kicked absolute ass. But honestly, my favorite character in the MCU because of this movie is Thor. I did not care about Thor Ragnarok that much, even though everybody says, oh, that's like the most fun MCU movie of all time for sure. That's like, and it's not going to be on my list, obviously. One of my hot takes, but you know, the Thor I really like is the Thor in Infinity War, where he just goes absolutely berserk and he's freaking flying with his like mohawky fro kind of thing, flying through the air with his blue lightning and everything. He's just going absolutely ham, and you're just like, this is the most powerful character in the MCU, even though obviously Scarlet Witch might do some crazy crap in Multiverse of Madness. Garrett's already explained why it's really good. Just a crazy scale, cultural moment in the history of movies in general, let alone MCU movies. Those are our top 10 lists. Let us know what you think in the comments. Let us know what some of your favorites are. Let's see your list. Were my takes too hot? Was I the dumbest person you've ever seen on a YouTube video?
Do you think Eternals or Black Widow should appear in my top 10? Or should I rush home right now to Disney Plus and check them out right now?
Easily some of the most popular MCU movies, so I'm sure there will be a plethora of comments.
Definitely not divisive at all. You know what a plethora means, by the way.
I just would like to know if you know what a plethora is.
If you enjoyed this, there are plenty more videos like it on the channel. So like and subscribe, and we will continue to put out content like this.
If you want us to cover any other top 10 lists or any other movies in particular you want us to shoot the breeze about, put them in the comments. We'll be happy to help you out.